A single inch of space separates the finger of God from Adam's hand. And across 5 centuries, that gap has terrified, inspired, and unsettled more people than perhaps any other image in Western art. In 1960, a Vatican restorer claimed he heard whispers in the Sistine Chapel whenever he looked up at those hands, always at that moment, always in that space. What did Michelangelo hide in this millimeter of tension? What secret message is frozen in the air between man and his maker? The answer begins in the year 1511, as Michelangelo stands high atop a wooden scaffold, neck craned backward, his arm aching with fatigue. Fresco pigment drips into his eyes, but he refuses to blink. After 4 years of back-breaking labor, he brings his brush to the ceiling one last time. In that instant, the hands are born. Adam's left, languid and open, God's right, surging forward with impossible urgency. The world instantly recognizes the scene, the birth of humanity, the divine spark. But what almost no one saw for centuries is that Adam's hand is not simply passive. It's anatomically borrowed from the shape of the human brain. Michelangelo, who dissected corpses at night, painted the architecture of thought into the flesh of the first man. But why? Why embed a brain in the act of creation? The answer may lie not in Adam alone, but in the assembly crowding around God. Hovering inside a swirling crimson shroud, God is not alone. He's surrounded by a thrumming mass of figures, limbs entangled, eyes wide, bodies half-formed. To the casual viewer, they're angels. But forensic anatomy studies in the 20th century revealed something uncanny. The shape of God's cloak, its folds and contours, matches the outline of a human brain, down to the details of the optic nerve. Michelangelo, it turns out, wasn't only a sculptor, he was a student of secrecy. Some scholars believe he hid this anatomical reference as a coded argument, that divine inspiration doesn't just create life, but thought itself. And the figures pressed around God, many Renaissance theologians claimed they were unborn souls, waiting for the breath of life. Yet in Michelangelo's vision, they float inside the mind of God, creation within creation, intellect birthing intellect. But how did a sculptor become an underground anatomist? And why risk the wrath of the church to make these statements with paint? Was there something in his own life that pushed him to see the divine as a matter of mind, not merely spirit? Michelangelo's fascination with flesh was as obsessive as it was controversial. Underneath Adam's idle pose, his hip jutting out, his gaze drifting away from God, there's an unsettling passivity. This is not a man eager for life. He seems, in fact, almost indifferent to the miracle about to occur. His hand doesn't reach out, but hangs limp. Some art historians read this as a theological statement. Man, even at the moment of creation, is separated from God by more than distance. The Renaissance celebrated human potential, but Michelangelo, who wrote poetry about his own spiritual doubts, may have been confessing something darker. Adam's pose echoes ancient marble statues, Apollo Belvedere, the Laocoon, yet here that classical perfection is undercut by a strange lassitude. Was Michelangelo hinting that humanity's greatest flaw is not sin, but apathy? Or did he fear a world in which the divine touch would go unnoticed, unreceived? And if so, what does that say about the human condition, and about Michelangelo himself, who spent years isolated, painting a ceiling almost no one would see up close? But the true mystery, the detail that's launched 1,000 debates, lies in the gap between those two hands. If you look closely, God's finger is tense, muscles flexed, knuckles white with force. Adam's, by contrast, is loose, the wrist bent in unconscious repose. The space between is impossibly small, less than an inch, but infinite in symbolism. Some scientists in the early 19th century, inspired by the discovery of electricity, compared this scene to a lightning bolt, the divine spark leaping from one conductor to another. But Michelangelo painted this in an age before modern science, at a time when the spark of life was a theological concept, not a physical one. So why leave this gap? Why not show the touch the moment the miracle is complete? The answer may be that Michelangelo wanted to freeze humanity in the act of becoming, forever on the cusp of awakening, never fully alive without the will to receive the gift. Or perhaps he was warning us. The last step is always ours to take. To understand how Michelangelo achieved such haunting realism, you have to look beneath the paint. Literally. In his youth, he bribed caretakers at the Santo Spirito mortuary in Florence for access to fresh cadavers. By candlelight, he peeled back skin, mapped the secrets of muscles, traced the networks of veins and tendons. He kept notebooks, filled with anatomical sketches so precise that modern surgeons still consult them. When he painted Adam, he rendered every contour with the obsessive eye of someone who'd seen the inside of a human body. The veins in Adam's wrist pulse with subtle life. The muscles of the abdomen flex and relax with impossible accuracy. In an era when most artists still drew bodies as smooth, generalized forms, Michelangelo gave Adam the specificity of a living man, yet stopped just short of completion. It's as if the painting itself waits for the final breath. But this mastery of anatomy wasn't merely technical, it was philosophical. In a time when the church insisted on the separation of body and soul, Michelangelo painted them as inseparable. Was he making a quietly heretical claim that divinity is not only above us, but within us, in flesh and thought alike? There's another secret, hidden in plain sight, beneath the crook of God's protective arm. Nestled among the crimson folds is a female figure. Face serene, body poised, eyes fixed not on God, but on Adam. Some say she is Eve waiting to be born from Adam's rib. Others see her as Sophia, the personification of wisdom, or even the soul itself, hovering on the threshold of existence. Her calm gaze stands in stark contrast to the swirling chaos around her, as if she alone knows what's about to unfold. Her hand wraps gently around God's arm, a gesture of both support and restraint. If she is Eve, she is present before Adam's awakening, a theological puzzle that upends the sequence of Genesis. If she is wisdom or the soul, then Michelangelo may be suggesting that knowledge and consciousness precede physical life. Why place her here, veiled but unmistakable? Perhaps Michelangelo wanted to remind viewers that creation is never singular, that every origin contains its own future, and every awakening brings with it the seeds of loss. But if this female figure represents wisdom, does her presence also foreshadow the eventual fall, the forbidden knowledge that will drive Adam and Eve from paradise? Look closely at the painting's surface, and you'll see a web of fine cracks running across the fresco. For centuries, the creation of Adam teetered on the edge of oblivion. Candle smoke, humidity, and centuries of neglect darkened Michelangelo's colors to near black. In the 1980s, Vatican restorers spent over a decade painstakingly cleaning the ceiling with solvents, uncovering pigments so vivid that many accused the team of repainting the masterpiece. But the revelations didn't stop at color. Infrared scans revealed changes Michelangelo made mid-painting, shifting figures, altering hands, even smudging out initial sketches. These pentimenti betray the artist's indecision, his drive to capture exactly the right moment of tension. But the cracks themselves are now part of the image, a reminder that even the most sacred creations are vulnerable to decay, loss, and reinterpretation. What do we make of a divine masterpiece that must be constantly rescued by human hands? And does our intervention change the meaning of what Michelangelo left behind? All of this, the anatomical detail, the hidden brains, the ambiguous woman, the cracks and scars, culminates in a single dizzying question. What does it mean to stand eternally on the brink of creation, to reach for the divine, and never quite touch it? Michelangelo's creation of Adam is not a portrait of completion, but of yearning. The hands never meet. The spark is always about to leap, always suspended. Art historians still debate whether the gap is a sign of hope, potential waiting to be realized, or a warning that the connection may never be made at all. In that space, Michelangelo captured the human condition, powerful, vulnerable, eternally unfinished. The secret in that inch of air is this: Michelangelo painted not the moment of creation, but the split second before. He left the act incomplete, forcing every viewer to stand in Adam's place, to feel the anticipation, the doubt, the hope. And here's the final twist, one that most visitors to the Sistine Chapel never realize. If you trace the angle of God's outstretched arm, it directs your gaze not just toward Adam, but toward the altar below, where Mass is celebrated. The painting becomes a living drama, reenacted every day. The divine spark offered, humanity invited to receive. But the choice, to reach back, to accept the gift, remains ours. Michelangelo locked an eternal question into the plaster. Will the divine and human ever truly connect, or are we doomed to forever reach across an unbridgeable gap? In that inch of space, he painted both our greatest longing and our greatest fear. Every time someone stares up at those hands, they become part of the story. The miracle is not in the touch, but in the tension. And perhaps that's the true legacy of the creation of Adam, that the meaning of life is found not in completion, but in the endless, aching reach for something just beyond our grasp.